Now let's talk about religion, monogamy, and marriage. Monogamy means one partner for life, and very few people have one sexual partner for life. They may have a girlfriend in high school and then later get married, but more typical is serial monogamy, or I guess it's called polygamy, is having one partner for a number of years and then another partner for a number of years. That is the typical nature of most human sexual activity. So where does marriage come in? You know, I did not realize that until I read this book, that marriage is a pretty new invention in the church. Because for centuries, the church was mostly concerned with the marriages of the rich and powerful, and showed little interest in the marriages of the peasant class. So the peasant class is everyone except the rich and powerful, really. That's all of us. So it was the local culture that dictated how and why a person got married. Church weddings were rare in Europe for 1,000 years or more. The church issued no marriage licenses. People simply married, quote unquote, by moving in together. So when did marriage become important? It was with the Reformation. I don't even know when that was. Was that in the 15 or 1600s? I'm not up in my history. And this is not a history channel, thank goodness. Wait, I need to look that up. Yeah, it's like 1500s to 1600s, that period. And the reason they did it, according to this author at least, is because the churches wanted to have claim to the children. They wanted more people in the church. So marriage in the church ensured membership by the children as well. Now, this model only works for about a quarter of all marriages because 50% of marriages end in divorce, and the 25% or more who remain in marriage are unhappy for life. So what is exactly the purpose of marriage? Why do people get married? Well, they get married for companionship, but it doesn't always last. So what's really interesting is that people can really define what they want out of marriage. Now, this is interesting. In 2011 in Mexico City, Mexico City noted that the city had a divorce rate of 50% and most marriages ended in 2 years. So they introduced legislation for a 2-year marriage contract. The contract could be renewed, but would automatically end after 2 years. The Catholic Church complained. Hugo Vladimir, spokesman for the Mexican Archdiocese, said, "This reform is absurd. It contradicts the nature of marriage." But the statement should have said it contradicts the nature of Catholic marriage. The church has no right to define marriage except for those inside the church. Now, there's a book that is written called Love Without Limits, which is exploring alternative relationship models. It's written by Dr. Deborah Anapol. And she advocates negotiations about marriage expectations and how to dissolve it in a civilized and respectful manner. This is something that the BDS community already does in their relationship contracts. And I would also say that it also would add into what is a prenup. A prenup is something that people say is not romantic, but it is actually a really good idea because it forces people to sit down and say, what do we expect out of this marriage, and how are we going to resolve it if and when it dissolves? Because all relationships either end by divorce or the death of one or the other person. And who is the well-known divorce expert? He is all over YouTube now. He wrote a book. Oh yes, James Sexton. How to Stay in Love. And he was recently on Chris Williamson's podcast, so you might want to check that out. And he's really in favor of prenups. And a good idea is to kind of go, okay, what each of us brought into the relationship is what each of us will take out of the relationship. And as you're in the relationship, to kind of negotiate, you know, oh, we're buying this, whose is it going to be if we split up? You know, instead of having this like very tight ownership model where people are not really sure of where they stand, it should be something that people are willing to discuss. And that is, seems very respectful to both people. And I think in the case of someone who has children, if the wife is a stay-at-home wife, is to say like, okay, if we get divorced, what are we going to do if I'm a stay-at-home wife? Those things should be discussed in advance so that people can have a real reality check, and men can feel confident about getting married and not afraid of the divorce, or women unsure of the divorce. It's kind of complicated when it comes to children, because I think in our society we do not value children enough and motherhood enough, and we don't really have a good system for raising our children and who will be there with the children, because in the olden days women did their work with their children, alongside their children many times. You know, in hunter-gatherer tribes, of course, or if they were like spinning yarn, or they were working on the farm, they could have their children with them, their young children. But now that so many jobs are more in the knowledge economy and people have to sit at their computers and focus, it has less allowance for women to work with their children. So that's a tricky one, but certainly when children go to school, women can definitely be working. That's just my own input here on this. I hope you like this video about the role of marriage and religion.